Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast, bringing you weekly insights into the newspaper and magazine publishing sector. I'm Ciar Byrne, and this week my guest is John Barnes, Chief Digital Officer at William Reed Business Media. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Acorn Web Offset, the Yorkshire-based specialist A5 and A4 magazine printer. With high-speed web offset and sheet-fed printing, together with in-house saddle stitching, perfect binding and mailing services, Acorn can cope with the most demanding of production turnarounds. Acorn prides itself on its efficiency and low-cost print production. For more information, visit acornweb.co.uk. John Barnes joined leading B2B publisher William Reed in June as Chief Digital Officer, helping to evolve the digital strategy for brands including The Grocer, World's 50 Best Restaurants and British Baker. He has extensive experience in the B2B publishing sector, including a decade spent in senior roles at Incisive Media and setting up Sloop Media, a specialist consultancy for digital media companies. John, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So can we begin by talking through your career to date? I believe that you began in publishing as an editor before going on to become a publisher. And then, as I said in the preamble, you worked at Incisive Media and most recently set up your own consultancy before joining William Reed. How's that brought you to where you are today?
Well, I was a journalist originally, which I still have a great passion for. So, I follow developments in journalism very avidly, and being a journalist, particularly specialising in computers, which is what I was doing then, got me to start working on the internet in the very early days. So from about 1991 onwards, I was involved in the internet, and I would say that's the primary reason I am where I am today. I spent some time at VNU, very happy years, where I was an editor of many magazines. I took the opportunity to set up the digital business there. And that led to a publishing job, which then led to a director's job, which then led to the managing director of that company. And we were acquired by Incisive Media in 2007. And I was able to help them with my experience of the internet to date to really expand their internet offering, and during that time, during nearly 10 years, we won the AOP Digital Publisher of the Year Award 4 times, which was fantastic for us. We really, as collectively as a team, transformed the digital offering, and a part of the business that I was running was sold to a French company, Infopro, in 2016 for a really healthy amount of money. And I spent another couple of years there with them as Chief Digital Officer, and that finished last April. And then I started working on Sloop Media, which is, as you say, a digital consultancy. Had a number of different clients, predominantly B2B, that's what I specialised in, and also specialising in things like paid circulation, lead generation, so what I would call sustainable business models. And one of my clients was William Reed, and I helped them with a couple of projects. And when the corona crisis came along, I had been doing some consultancy work there. And rather out of the blue, I was asked if I'd like to join the team and help them sort of speed up their digital transformation. And I thought that would be a tremendous opportunity. So I decided to do that. And that's basically where I am now.
Right. So in a way, COVID-19 brought up this new opportunity for you.
I think what COVID-19 has done is it's sort of accelerated everybody's thinking about how digital fits into the publishing landscape. And I think a lot of people who maybe thought, certain things couldn't happen on certain brands and, certain models wouldn't work for their kind of company. I think they've had to rethink that as the workforce has sort of moved on to Teams and various tools like that. And people realise that you can actually produce national newspapers from a load of people's bedrooms. And they've realised that you can actually run events from people that are working in 6 or 7 different locations on video. And every single night we see a new kind of series of interviews or a new format for question time or a different way of doing the Archers as a result of what's going on. And I think it's a really interesting time for media. And I think, William Reed's recognised that. They certainly adapted amazingly in the time. And, I'm very proud to be part of helping the management team there accelerate that.
So this opportunity, as you say, came somewhat out of the blue. What is the brief for your role? Do you have a brief, and what are you hoping to achieve?
So as the Chief Digital Officer, what I'm really trying to do is to pull together certain strands in the business to get them focused on a longer term strategy that the executive team and the CEO are devising with me. And the main objective is to ensure that, the stable of brands, very old, very successful brands, are able to sort of take advantage of the changes in such a way that they can adapt their business models, but without throwing away what has made those brands very successful. So, journalism, the fact that print has a part to play for some of those brands, face-to-face events when they come back will still be very important. But how can we sort of use this time and the sense of change that's taking place in society as much as the media industry to basically cement some long-term changes that will make the business bigger, better and stronger.
And I was going to ask what makes a good Chief Digital Officer, but you have been working with the internet since its very early days. And so I wondered what sort of skill sets and experience you've built up over the years as a result of that.
Well, I think I think that there's skills that you need to be a Chief Digital Officer, but I think there are skills you need to be successful in digital. And I think one of them is just being very inquisitive and being prepared to try things out. And sometimes I think, everybody's worked with a colleague or a manager or in a team where some people are very scared about trying things out. And, the secret to successful internet publishing is change. And if you don't like change, it's not a very good job for you. And if you do like change, it's important to make sure that you can sort of understand where the market is going, what the implications might be to your particular brand or business, and how you can look at those implications and turn them into opportunities that you can then basically try and build products or ideas around.
And as you say, over the last 2 decades, the publishing industry has been on this digital transformation journey. I'm really interested to hear you say, and you're not alone, that the coronavirus crisis has accelerated that journey, that digital journey. How do you see the current state of play in the B2B sector?
So I was working with quite a few different clients last year, and it was obviously pre-COVID. So we had no idea what was coming around the corner. But what was starting to happen, and I think it's been a long-term sort of trend, but it really sped up during 2019, was that the need to really know who your readers are, who your visitors are on your website has become a sort of an absolute imperative for pretty much any publisher, whether you're in B2B or B2C. But particularly in B2B, it is really essential because, when the internet came along and the free CPM ad model kind of evolved, most B2B publishers would have had quite successful controlled circulations, or they would have had paid subscription models. But for whatever reason, everybody, V&U included, Incisive included, William Reed to an extent, most people I know decided that open access was good and volume of impressions was the thing to go after. There might be different models in monetizing that, like tenancy. But in essence, we lost sight of trying to collect deep and narrow databases about who the readers were. And I think that has been the sort of overarching trend of 2019. And I think as we've gone into this crisis, it's become ever more important. And I just see lots and lots of people now experimenting with meters, with registration walls, with different ways of actually enticing people to pass over details, partly because of GDPR and partly because advertisers haven't got the luxury, because of changes in privacy, to basically, target users on multiple sites. They've had to go back to the concept of context and trying to sort of buy positions within sites to target known groups of readers. So that knowledge of who your readers are online has become absolutely the key thing for everybody to pursue.
And what do you see as the best way to go about that? You've mentioned metrics, you've mentioned registration walls. How can you extract that deeper information?
I think that one of the key things to do is that, you want to sort of appeal to somebody when they're engaged and interested in the site. So, for example, we've seen a sort of an enormous explosion of COVID-19 newsletters. So very topical, very relevant. Everybody wants to know what's going on. The implications in different industries, are quite far-reaching and different. So the implications in the food industry will be different to the implications in the event industry or the car industry. And so publications that service vertical markets are very well placed to talk in detailed terms about those kind of implications. That's one thing. The other thing is to sort of be much more gentle about asking questions rather than presenting somebody with a 10, 15 page form. Collect an email address after they've been doing some things on your website. Ask them some more questions to see if, by telling you what they do or what they're interested in, you can target information to them more easily, so that every time they're passing over information, it's a form of transaction that's going to create a benefit to the user rather than it being an inconvenience about passing over information. And then ultimately, starting to make suggestions about content, trying to explain that, if you give more information, you might have access to more types of content or better personalization or better targeting and so on, so that you work with the reader and respect the reader's privacy by presenting with things that are going to find useful and interesting, and in return they pass over information that makes that information more targeted to them.
I was going to ask about strengths and weaknesses in the B2B publishing sector, and in some ways, with what you've just said, you've touched on that. How does William Reed compare in that landscape? You've come in to help them negotiate that. How does it sit at the moment?
I think William Reed is an incredibly good business. I mean, it's got very, very good brands. I always respect companies that focus on content and the quality of journalism, which William Reed very much does. And they have an incredibly talented, quite young workforce. And I think they compare very well to other B2B publishers. Obviously, the food and drink market is a different market, and certainly through the coronavirus, the hospitality sector, pubs, restaurants have been very, very badly impacted. And I think what William Reed has done, which is why I think it's an interesting B2B company, is it's sort of adapted its coverage to help those people, partly through information about what's going on, but also interesting use of things like video to sort of explain how you might reopen a socially distanced restaurant, or how you might adapt your business to start doing deliveries and things like that. So rather than sort of being an outsider on the market, William Reed is very much inside the market, and it's part of the market, and it connects buyers and sellers. And I think that is one of the most important things about a successful B2B company. You've got to be within the market, understand the market, and the market needs to feel that you're a part of the market and a trusted ally in terms of what you're doing. You're keeping them informed, educated, but you're also challenging them with content and providing them with opportunities to learn.
And as you say, William Reed's audience has really come into the spotlight during this pandemic. You have the restaurants and caterers who have suffered immensely from lockdown, but you also have the grocery businesses that have seen this as an extremely busy time. How has it catered to that sector?
It's interesting you say that, because, a lot of people in the wider media have been talking about the food retailing market as almost being another sort of frontline service during the pandemic. And so, there's been a lot of support, things like webcasts, increase in podcasts, basically sharing experiences between different kinds of companies and different kinds of people. as I said, the sort of explosion of different kinds of newsletters that are going to help people push information to them. But we've also just seen an enormous amount of traffic coming to all of the websites, I think as many B2B and B2C publishers have, because if you are a trusted brand in a marketplace, in times of crisis, you are going to turn to the sources you trust. It's a sort of BBC effect. And I think magazines like The Grocer, Morning Advertiser, Restaurant Magazine, all of those kind of publications have really come into their own. And those markets trust them and want to know what those journalists think about what's going on and what they can learn from it. So it's become, I would say, maybe a bit more collegiate. People are sharing a bit more. They're swapping ideas a bit more. And right at the middle of that are the William Reed brands.
And what sort of upturn have you seen in traffic?
I wouldn't want to sort of talk about numbers, but we've seen really significant increase in traffic. And, if we look at this time last year, we're substantially up in terms of traffic. And what that's helping us do is convert that into more known users, which is what I was talking about earlier on.
Yeah, okay. And how do you see that digital offering, which is proving so popular at the moment, evolving?
A good example it would be if you take sort of say webinars as a good example. Traditionally a webinar would be a sort of 1 hour recorded or live event that would be about a particular subject, maybe once a month or something like that. What we've seen through this sort of pandemic is because some of the face-to-face events haven't been able to take place, the formats for different kinds of webinars have come into play. So we've launched things like a webinar series. So it's almost like a deconstructed conference program where you might have multiple streams over a couple of days. These are multiple streams of 1 hour webinars over a couple of weeks. So you subscribe to the series, and then you attend the various parts of the series you'd like to interact with, as you would do if you were going to a conference and you'd attend different conference streams. That's one thing. The mixture of pre-recorded and live within those kind of webinar programs has become more and more important. We've also started to do things called broadcast series. So as I mentioned, how do you open a socially distanced restaurant? How do you actually set up tables? How do you cater with some of the health issues? How do you actually bill people? How do you get them to collect the money? If you've got an open kitchen, how does that kind of work? So lots and lots of innovation in and around video. We've also seen an increase in podcasting. We've invested in a new podcasting platform as a result, and obviously we're on a podcast today, so you know exactly how that kind of works.
Yes.
And how popular they've become. And then also the need to sort of download what would have been historically paper assets. So while some publications have suspended printing across the B2B industry, you're still able to sort of lay out documents that can be downloadable as PDFs, so guides and various things like that. And obviously that's another way in which you can have a data exchange. You can download a valuable document in return for just telling us who you are. And so those kind of innovations have become really, really important over the last few months.
So it's really multiple innovations going on simultaneously.
Yes, and I think probably one of the things that's holding it back is just the amount of time in the day, because there are so many things that could be done. But I think what I've been impressed with across the board, but also particularly at William Reed, is the ability of people just to pick up these ideas and experiment with them quite effectively. To not just provide an information service, but also to provide revenue and to build revenue back that would have historically been face to face. So, it's quite an impressive thing, really. And I think we're going to look back on the last few months, in a couple of years' time, as really being a kind of an age that changed B2B and publishing, digital publishing, actually for the better. A lot more innovation and putting content firmly on centre stage, which is, what really good media, digital media, is all about. It's about good content and trusted brands.
Well, coming on to paid content. You've talked about the importance of gathering deeper information about your audience, but in the past you have spoken and written quite a lot about paid content models, and these are becoming increasingly important for publishers. What do you see as the key pillars of a successful paid content strategy? And what are the most frequent mistakes publishers make when they're trying to set up a paid content model?
I think that the most important thing is, what is the essential pull of your publication? What is it you do that is valuable to the audience? For some brands, it might be the concept of community. So the ability to swap and share ideas, with like-minded people. For others, it might just be, very much about changes and trends and developments that are going on in the industry. Others, it might be data, getting data or information about what's going on. But there will always be something that is, the core, the essence of what your brand basically is about. And that's the thing you need to lead with on a paid subscription strategy, to make sure that that content is positioned in the right way, to see that it is valuable, it's easily accessible. You can try it before you buy it. So the concept of metering is part of that idea, but also the concept of an executive summary of an article that if you want to read, you have to log in, subscribe, or take a trial, maybe pay-per-view kind of content as well is in that space. And then the other key thing about it is that for B2B companies in particular is to recognize that a digital subscription isn't like a print subscription. So a print subscription has an advantage over digital in the sense that you have something that's physical that arrives with a certain frequency and reminds the reader that you are there. So the magazine lands on the desk and it's arrived. You'll pick it up and you'll read it. Digital doesn't have that luxury. So you have to be in position to make sure your content's readily accessible. That's obviously through optimizing it for search engines, but it's also pushing it out on content marketing platforms. And it's also about having a good free to sign up newsletter strategy so that the newsletter performs the function of the physical magazine. It reminds users that you're there. And then I think the final thing is that, you've got to recognize that different parts of the market, particularly if you're working in B2B and you're looking at enterprise subscriptions, different parts of the market are going to place different values on the content. So if you can adapt your pricing structure to reflect that, is what I would call to the criticality of the content. So how critical is the content to different sectors and subsectors? And can you reflect that criticality in the price? Because if the content is highly critical, then lots of different functions within the business are going to access the site because lots of different people in the business are going to find the content useful. That is a more critical subscription for a company than a business that might only access 10 or 15% of the content. So can you reflect that in how you price that and how you price access to that? And I think finally, enterprise subscriptions are really the big sort of talking point for most publishers. They've been successful historically with one-to-one subscriptions, but moving into enterprise subscriptions really places a different kind of challenge on people. And that's why it's important to really get a sense of who the companies are that are coming to your site, so you can start to target them with those kind of offers I was just describing.
Right. And another area that we've seen suffer greatly during COVID-19 is advertising. When it comes to digital advertising, it's still important to publishers. What are successful publishers doing at the moment to optimize their digital advertising revenues?
Well, as I said, a lot of move into video has created options for pre-roll video advertising that probably didn't exist at quite a lot of B2B companies several months ago because the volume just wasn't there. That's one thing. I think the other thing is recognizing that engagement with advertising is much more important than impressions. So, lots of people are talking about viewability and the view rate, but, how many people are starting to report back on time, so cost per hour kind of metrics. That's a really important thing for advertisers. And then also finally, trying to give some sense of who's actually seen the adverts. So rather than just saying it had this many impressions that for this amount of time, who were they? Were they logged in users? Were they just users that were passing? Were they particular kinds of companies? And increasingly in B2B in particular, there's this concept of moving into account-based marketing. So working with clients and agencies to target particular companies that an advertiser wants to target, so that you use advertising to sort of remind those customers when they visit your site that that advertiser is actually there. So, it could be targeting a particular IT company, or it could be targeting a bank, maybe targeting a particular kind of supermarket. So that becomes an important sort of aspect of it. And I think account-based marketing programs, advertising programs, are going to be increasingly more important as we come out of this pandemic, because I think advertising spend is going to be even more closely scrutinised.
Well, I was going to come on to say we've all spent the last few months working from home, glued to our screens, happy to watch webinars for want of much else to do. As we move out of lockdown, what would your advice be to publishers who want to hold on to some of those innovations which have actually worked during the pandemic?
I think everybody wants to return to normal. I've got some teenage kids; they're desperate to return to normal. I can't wait to go to a nice restaurant and have a nice meal again. But I think some things will have changed, and I think media, as I said earlier, will have changed. I don't think what will have changed, though, is the need to actually meet people face to face. So I think the online event, the face to face event industry will come back quite strongly, but I think it will be linked much more closely to digital. So whether that's downloading assets instead of scanning badges on stands, or whether it's actually having a mixture of interactive video and live speaking and presentations at particular events. And also the concept of extending events beyond the 2 days. So rather than just having a 1 or 2 day event, you could have a program, more like a festival kind of program, over a period of weeks, where it's a mixture of live and recorded digital events with live face-to-face activities, and sort of the opportunity to meet people and discuss things in person. I think from an advertising point of view, account-based marketing is something that I think a lot of people want to hang on to. I think podcasts and webinar video series are going to just continue to explode. I think a lot of people have realised that whilst there are some technical challenges, good journalism is quite well suited to podcasting and can be adapted very well to video if you've got the right kind of people and the right kind of approach and the right kind of format, thinking about formats. And then I think finally lead generation is going to be vitally important to everybody. I think it's linked to knowing who your users are, and it's linked to account-based marketing. It's linked to events in a way, but actually being able to distribute information to an audience on behalf of a third party, and being able to explain to that third party who the audience is, what they've done, and what they might have found useful about that is going to be an important part of the media offering. And then, of course, paid subscriptions, and particularly enterprise subscriptions. So I think what most people are going to hang on to is the innovation, and I think they're going to continue to innovate as print and face-to-face events come back, and keep the best bits and of both, because I think we've discovered some good bits of digital we didn't know were there.
In terms of emerging technologies and platforms, is there anything that's caught your eye recently?
Well, everybody's talking about TikTok. I've seen endless TikTok videos and things. I've quite enjoyed some of them. How that quite adapts to B2B or media in general needs to be sort of seen. But we know from many of these tools, Snapchat, Instagram, that once you've got the volume of users, the opportunity to develop commercial opportunities come along. And we wouldn't have thought some years ago that B2B sites would have successful Instagram followings, but it's happened. So I think some of these emerging platforms like TikTok are going to become more important as they figure out what their commercial offer is, and as publishers and media organisations, ad agencies and things start to see the advantage of targeting that audience in a particular way. I mean, what I always say to people, particularly in and around social kind of tools, is that sometimes they're placed mistakenly as sort of consumer tools. But you've got to remember that if you've got a massive audience on a site like Instagram or Facebook, within that audience are going to be subsets of your market, because whilst they are consumers, they're also people that work in certain kinds of businesses. So the concentration of B2B verticals are usually quite high if you look for them in the right kind of way, and they can be a successful part of your media offering. So I think TikTok probably will become important. Quite how yet, I don't know.
And are there any thought leaders in the digital space that you would recommend other publishers to look out for?
I follow so many different kinds of publications and people. I mean, if it was about journalism and how journalism is adapting and changing, I would always recommend reading Emily Bell, who is obviously now a professor of journalism, but was
I used to work for Emily Bell many years ago, so I would
that's a good tip. I like some of the people at DigiDay. I think they've got some very, very good people there. They're always quite interesting to sort of follow. They're usually very interesting to talk to, and they've got lots of kind of good ideas. I've told you about my love for journalism, so Nyman Journalism Lab is somewhere I go to very, very often to get ideas. And I think, if you look at sort of LinkedIn thought leaders, somebody called Anthony James, who I follow, who's just very interested in how technology is being used in lots of different ways. And usually it comes back to digital in some kind of way. So they're the kind of people I would follow. And also many of the people I've worked with, I've worked with some really talented people, and I take a keen interest through LinkedIn in following ex-colleagues or current colleagues to see what they're doing. And very often some of the best ideas come from people that are just doing interesting things.
And finally, as someone who works in the digital space, what do you do to relax? Do you have a favourite app or website, or do you turn screens off altogether?
Well, our house is... we've got 2 teenagers, and so you can imagine it's quite device heavy. And we've had a few challenges throughout the coronavirus lockdown with multiple videos going on and PlayStations being played. So, we keep screens on quite a lot. We quite enjoy screens. Probably my greatest pleasure is Audible and listening to books. I like reading books as well. So I'm a big Kindle user, which unfortunately is a screen. But at least it's not an illuminated screen, so it doesn't hurt your eyes so much. And then the really big passion of my life is cooking. So I do lots and lots of cooking, which has been very useful in the pandemic, I have to say.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
A big thank you again to Acorn Web Offset for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for a new magazine printer, then check out their website at acornweb.co.uk or contact Matt Carey on 07714 299 105 or by email at matthew.carey@acornweb.co.uk. Thank you to John for being our guest this week. John's Twitter handle is @JohnMNBarnes. John has written a number of articles for In Publishing over the years, and these can be found at inpublishing.co.uk. Just search for John Barnes. Our guest next week is Sam Kinchin-Smith, Head of Special Projects at the London Review of Books. If you'd like to get in touch with us, then email editorial@inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week on the In Publishing podcast.